So unfortunately, DBART was all booked up with exams, but we are moving to, I would say, the more elegant Jordan Hall. So 105 Jordan will be our new space, and I will be sending this out in an email. You will not be expected to remember it. Just wanted to let you know, good news that I got just a few hours ago. Second piece of good news is that the sweatshirt order is in. We splurged for embroidery this year. That's exciting, gold embroidery. And so we should have those by the first meeting. I don't know if I will be able to lug them all over from the StuGov office to Jordan. So TBD on that, but they should be in by the first day of class. Again, just TBD on whether I'll be able to present it to you in person or if you could trek over to the StuGov office to pick that up. But another exciting piece of news. And then in terms of what Rachel and Aaron and I have been up to over this January term, we've met multiple times, both in December and January, with the student advisory group for campus reopening. So I have some really productive discussions there with grad students, law students, MBA students, led by Aaron Hoffman-Harding, as well as Hugh Page and Laurel Carlson. So I've really enjoyed those discussions. And the goal for tonight's session with Aaron is really also to kind of create that experience for you all as well, to kind of get the behind the scenes look at the rationale behind the decision-making processes for this semester, get some more transparency, be able to communicate that to your constituents and use those formal channels that we have set up. So really looking forward to that as well. I will just ask Aaron, have you been able to get that live streaming up yet?
We are good. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. All of these things were important to share with you, but I will, without further ado, kind of change the focus here as well to ground rules for our discussion. First of all, I know we haven't had a Senate meeting on Zoom in a while, so we will be relying on that good old hand raise feature. I'll be taking hands in the order that I see them. And then I will privilege folks who have not yet had a chance to ask a question in line over those who are asking their second question. So be sure to have your top question as your number one. And then I would also like to smile upon a quick motion, a 2-minute limit on senators speaking per recognition from myself, reservable for both follow-up as well as recognizing other speaking or non-speaking members. And that 2 minutes, that will be controlled by our parliamentarian, Thomas Davis. If anyone wants to make that motion, it would be smiled upon.
Motion to limit speaking to 2 minutes.
Second.
All right, can we have debate on that motion?
Motion to end debate, move to a vote.
Second.
Okay, we can now vote on that. Okay, you guys know what to do, the green check marks. All right, get those check marks or X's up, either way. Okay, fabulous. We can close debate then. And we can now vote on that motion to limit speaking time to 2 minutes with Aaron Hoffman-Harding staying with us until 8 p.m. Okay, wow, much faster this time. Thank you, folks. Okay, 2-minute speaking time. And fabulous, with the ground rules laid out, I can hand it over to Ms. Aaron Hoffman-Harding. And if you'd like to just give a brief presentation, that would be wonderful. And then open the floor for questions and I'll facilitate that process.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening or good afternoon, depending on where all of you still are. I thought, Sarah, I would just offer some brief remarks that might explain, Catherine, thank you for the minutes from November, the time that we have been away from the university and what really led to the announcement last week. And I'm hoping we can actually spend most of our time answering any questions that all of you might have. But as you heard, the Campus Reopening Committee, which consists of students, as Sarah said, from undergraduate, professional, and our graduate programs, we all along the way since June have been able to gather feedback from that group. And Father John has a reopening committee, which I have the opportunity to serve on. And in a very similar way, Father John's committee really reflected on some of the successes we hoped we had in the fall semester and areas where we thought we could really improve. I should name out loud that I am truly excited. All of you will be returning over the next week and will be beginning classes again in person. I wish, however, that it was a semester we were beginning with full vaccination and in a much more normal fashion. And so I think I can only imagine of you, this pandemic and its impact is having such a substantial experience on how we're able to connect with one another and keep one another healthy and safe. And so everything that we have been reflecting on in the time that you've been away from campus has been designed to do what we can to keep that community safe and well, and to do even better than the fall. If there is one thing that Father John's group, and I know this sentiment was shared by students, really hopes to achieve this spring differently than the fall, it is fewer cases of COVID on campus. And that is an area we think we must improve, and that is really for your own safety and the safety of our broader community at Notre Dame, our faculty and our staff, as well as the broader South Bend community. And so 2 of the changes that you saw announced last week are, we hope, a way that we can help keep the campus community safe from one another. One, certainly in Mike Seaman as the leader of the COVID response unit, is the subject matter expert there, is much more frequent testing this semester. And then the second is what Sarah asked me to talk about today, which is the campus compact. And just to give you a sense of what led us to having a compact and really some of the additions to the code, was talking with peers and actually hearing and realizing that we ended up, and I in particular, sent a lot of letters over the course of the fall. And one piece of feedback we heard from students is that at sometimes, and this is true because we were adapting to circumstances, but could we have a better sense and more transparency of what's expected and what might be the results, because we did hear some feedback from students that there was sometimes confusion about what might result if a particular policy that the university had put in place was not transparent. So at its core, I would say the compact is itself designed to be our best effort at what we're asking of students for the course of the spring semester. Of course, we may still need to adapt to changing circumstances, but I hope by and large, when you as students read it, it felt familiar in a sense, but hopefully can be a more comprehensive resource. I know, secondly, that there are questions that I imagine I'll hear from all of you, and I want to do that, about the addendum to DULOC and how we will handle any violations of the campus compact. And I would group that into 2 categories. We knew, because we were going to be changing this surveillance testing program, that we were going to have a new set of alternatives and set of outcomes to make that testing mandatory. You may remember from the fall that we had the Clemson tickets were one instance where we asked all students to be tested in advance, and then late in the semester, of course, we had exit testing. Because we knew we were going to be testing each week, we wanted to be very clear and make sure students understood how we would handle mandatory testing. So that's one piece of the addition to the code. And then the second is really allows us the opportunity to handle any other violations of the compact in an expeditious manner. And that, I think, and at least from what I've been able to read from some student reactions so far, is a tough balancing act. And we've really tried to strike a balance here, and I'm happy to talk about how we did that. But again, what we wanted to do is to make sure that students had notice of what was asked of all of you and our members of the community. And then if there was a concern or a report that we received, that a student got notice of that, had an opportunity to respond, but countervailingly, because of the situation that we're in with more variants in the country that have greater concerns about transmission, that we could act quickly as a university. And in a sense, that is what the new code tries to offer as an alternative process, so that we can respond swiftly, but still do so in a way that students know what's coming. One of my deepest hopes from last week's announcement was actually that students would read and understand everything that the university has asked, and it's why I'm here tonight. So I will maybe close there and just say I hope that gives you a sense of where the compact is, where it came from, what we're hoping to achieve ultimately is a safer community together. And I'm really happy to answer any questions that you might have about the compact itself or the process.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin, for walking us through the administration's rationale in this process. We really appreciate it. At this time, I'll now be taking any questions or comments from senators. Just raise that hand. All right. And the first one I see is Renee Pearson. Go for it, Renee.
Hi there. So my first question is just is there a potential for the terms of the campus compact to be edited throughout the semester as like new information rises and new student input comes in at all?
Renee, there is. So you heard me say it's our best effort to give you everything we know right now. But perhaps it seems trivial, but you'll also see in the compact that we really do ask students to check your email because we might have to change conditions. And I would say that that would go in either direction, right? It could be something more we ask of you or something because perhaps the vaccine arrives more quickly than we think that might allow us to relax some of the expectations we've set for campus. So please check your email, please watch, and we'll try to do as much via both social and your email as we can.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, next up, we've got Jordan Leiden.
Hi. I think that speaking from myself and my constituents' points of view, we were a bit confused on this and would like some clarification. We were wondering, how does expediting the procedures for compact violations and removal of the ability to appeal those decisions help to keep students, staff, and then the broader community safer?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, for the question. So as I alluded, it allows us to respond, for example, if there is concerning behavior in a more swift fashion, so that we might be able to have an intervention with a student or a conversation. It is in no way, shape, or form designed to surprise students, but simply allow us to address the behavior that might be a concern to all of us from a safety standpoint in the campus community a little bit quicker.
All right, thanks so much, Jordan. We've got Patrick Lee up next.
Hi, Ms. Alman Harding. Thanks for coming to the meeting. I think I really appreciate you taking questions because I know that there's a lot of buzz going on about this. Just one thing that I'm a little curious about, and I know a lot of guys from Stanford are as well, just regarding kind of campus life as a whole in the second semester. This compact, I know that it reads, and especially the addendum to do lock, as like an extension of the rules, and it's much clearer than anything we had first semester. And I know that you mentioned you guys are trying to balance things, but and the rules for residential life are not yet out officially, but I would assume that they stay largely the same. And that, I think, paints a picture to a lot of kids of a semester that's kind of dreary. You know, when it's going to be gray and 20 degrees, and we can only have, I don't know, 2 people from our section in our room. So outside of class, you know, if we have friends in other dorms or just want to do something else, I would just like to hear about any kind of balance that you guys thought of regarding student life, or maybe suggestions for opening different buildings or changing residential life, just to encourage, you know, adherence to all these policies.
Patrick, thanks. First of all, one of my biggest worries, and I think those who've served on the reopening committee with us, has always been these months of February and March. So you're absolutely right, Patrick, that I think it's going to take all of us together, thinking through creatively how we can continue to connect with one another. And actually, you'll probably get another letter, I hope, from me tomorrow that goes to some of those broader points. You're right that we haven't shared news on the residence hall guest policy yet, but please know that that feedback too has been heard by students about what worked. And you may remember we changed that a couple of times in the fall, and perhaps opportunities we have to relax it. I wish I could announce it tonight, but it's my responsibility to actually share that and get official approval before I can communicate it. But what I can share with you is, without question, we have heard that students need more spaces and opportunities to connect with one another. So we're working really hard, again, balancing what we think we can responsibly offer to keep our community as safe as possible, but also being really mindful of the mental health toll and the need to not be isolated among students. What I can, I think, not break news, because they're actually under construction right now, is one success I think we did have in the fall, thanks to some campus collaborators, is spaces like Library Lawn and the South Lawn as they emerged. And happily, you'll see some new structures on North and South Quad that will offer, really, I think of them as extensions of Duncan Student Center and the Fortune Student Center. I'll let the marketing speak for itself and some of the decor. We hope that those are going to be attractive spaces for all of you, and we're planning to have those up in February and March as well from a student standpoint. So more news to come. What you heard from me last week was important news, and news we wanted to get in front of you early, but not the only news that we'll be sharing about what campus life will look like this fall. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patrick. We'll move next to Carson Thompson.
Hi, so this was just regarding one of the specifics in the campus compact. So under violations of the campus compact, one of the listed range of outcomes for violating it was the loss of net ID access. Would you be able to clarify what specifically that would mean for a student, considering the net IDs are connected to a lot of what we do online, like our grades and our email, things like that?
Yeah, thanks, Carson. So the net ID at this point is probably most likely only an outcome related to pre-matriculation testing. And the reason being is we think it's so important for all of our students to be tested upon arrival in South Bend that does carry that consequence of really shutting down access to different facilities and access to other university services. But there was a long discussion, and in fact, along the way, we had some different solutions in place. But at this point, I think that's probably the most likely utilization of it, is just for students who don't comply with pre-matriculation testing. Were that to change, you see it in there, but having served on the committee that put together the compact, I think that's really the only area we've contemplated it so far.
Thanks so much, Carson. Next up, we've got Thomas Davis.
I'll start my own time. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, Ms. Hoffenharden, for being here. I especially appreciate all the hard work that you've been putting in to prepare campus for our return this week. And I know how much I miss campus, and I know how much our ladies campus misses us. And I just want to let you know that all your hard work and from your team and the background that you do does not go unnoticed by me, at least. I did want to address my main concern with the new administrative process is the lack of student representation in the process, at least from the communication that we received. There wasn't much information on the composition of the team that will be handling this. And I believe this concern extends from the perspective of benchmarking with peer institutions. I know that the concept of benchmarking with peer institutions is important to your office. So I wanted to do my own research before. And what I found for the most part was similar to the campus compact, similar generally loose defined instances of behavior, and similarly no appeal process on COVID probation or similar outcomes. What I did want to share was kind of the lack of clarity in terms of the guidance or guidelines for how this team will be using that for the administrative process. One of the peer institutions that I found to be very helpful and I was quite impressed was Stanford University. The process at Stanford, they have a compact review panel, which is a group of 7 students, 4 faculty, and 5 staff who've been trained to deal with these issues. 3 of the members of the COVID compact panel come together with at least 1 student to review these instances. So I was curious, will there be a student perspective available for the Notre Dame approach of this process? And if not, I would certainly propose that becomes an important guideline, perhaps going forward as a way to adapt. I think a lot of the feedback that I've heard, it's not my job to represent students, but my own concern is the lack of student representation not so much logistics. Like I support how much we need to, be stewards of the South Bend community. My time's up. I'll stop.
Thanks, Thomas. And Sarah, you'll have to keep me honest because I may want to ask a follow-up question there, but let me at least answer the lack of clarity that you alluded to in terms of the administration of the process. And so the administrators on the process would be our trained conduct officers. And perhaps nobody's asked this, but I think it might be important for me to say that there is a person at the other side of this process. And it is, I hope, folks in my division who have come to this work because they care about working with students. And it also allows, I think, because I've seen some concerns about false reporting, which is why it's really important that a student can respond. And also, I think you've got folks with experience who would have a good eye for that kind of concern if we might need to go in some depth there. But right now contemplated, it is the team of trained conduct officers. So that's members of the Office of Community Standards and those who've also gone through a training by that office, who are all student affairs professionals. The question I might ask back, and this is where Sarah, please feel free to keep the meeting moving, and maybe Thomas, it's something we could discuss later, is it would be helpful for me to understand the purpose of what student input you think would be particularly valuable if it's looking at particular situations, or if it might be thinking about the range of outcomes and what different types of things, because I could imagine different ways of engaging students that we'd be open to. But the one complication of the size of a board that you describe at Stanford that didn't meet one of the values we were trying was to try to keep to be responsive and efficient in that process. But if you're looking for student input in other ways, I think that's something I'd like to learn more about.
Yeah, great question, Thomas. We can definitely return to it at the end if there's some time, or of course you two can continue this conversation offline. I know as Thomas has some expertise in the Judicial Council sphere, so that could be helpful as well. All right, we'll move it along to Grace Franco.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, I think one thing that me and my constituents noticed about the compact was the severity of the consequences. Largely, it's a lot of the same rules, but it seems like expulsion and suspension and those terms are kind of being threatened or used or thrown around more. And I guess my question is, are you concerned at all that the strict regulations and the harsher consequences, rather than motivating students to practice safe behavior, will actually create an atmosphere of like resentment toward the administration, kind of like we saw with the ripped up almost there signs that were placed down? And would you consider incentivizing the student body to practice COVID safe behavior by potentially saying we might lift the restrictions in terms of residential life if students are doing a good enough job complying with the rules? That's just from what I understood would be a more motivating factor in terms of complying with the protocol.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. Let me try to be thoughtful and very transparent in my reply. It is not my wish, Father John's wish, anybody in the administration's wish to have students expelled. And in fact, a long and important debate was at what point might that make sense and let me use testing perhaps as the most tangible example. If you read through the code, it is the third time through for a student with a human intervention before we would even contemplate that a student might be dismissed and sent home. That was the balancing act, right? If there is anything, as I reflected on conversations with peers of folks that had fewer institutions that had fewer cases than we did, the frequency and the importance of that testing was a really crucial element. And as successful as I think we were with the Clemson example and the exit testing example, is we weren't at 100% in terms of our compliance with testing. And we just think that is so important. And the stakes are so high that it needs to be a responsibility of any member of this community to come for that testing. But you're absolutely right, the stakes are high. That's why we didn't want to surprise students. To your point, perhaps about positive incentives, again, would be very open to that. Let me give you a tangible example again that we debated, and if there are ideas from students, we would certainly welcome them. It's around compliance with the daily health check, which too is important, right? We've debated around, could there be rewards? I don't know if it's a particular type of swag or an opportunity for halls or for individuals for ongoing completion there. So we'd be very open to positive incentives. We'd also be really open to, I have heard this concern from students and I don't know how best to respond to it. So help us about milestones, right? What would it take to? We've had as a university a very adaptive approach to changing conditions locally. But if we all wake up in March, as I said, and perhaps the vaccine arrives more quickly or there are no cases on campus, you certainly have my commitment that we would relook at things. None of us want to restrict your experience here at Notre Dame, but we do feel an enormous responsibility to keep this community more healthy than we were able to do, thank goodness. We didn't have more serious illness, but that's what we're worried about. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to give you an in-person experience, but as things can be relaxed, you certainly have our commitment that we would be open to doing so.
Thanks so much, Grace. We'll move on to Maggie Allen.
Hi, thank you so much once again for being here. This is providing a lot of clarity on a lot of issues. One thing that a lot of girls in Flaherty were wondering about is the COVID violation reporting hotline. We had that last semester and it's rolling over to this semester as well. However, a lot of people are concerned that it might create a hostile environment on campus because it's pitting students to kind of report against each other. I understand that it is for, to keep each other accountable, but it could also kind of snowball into that hostile environment. Another question about that is what will be done if information reported on the hotline is false? I mean, obviously that's not something that we're hoping to ever have, and we're hoping students won't do that, but how are we going to protect students' rights in that manner?
Yeah. Maggie, you've described the pros and cons well of the forum itself, which is an opportunity, we hope at its best, to keep one another safe by offering an avenue for accountability. But it had some worrisome impact, right? I know within not only this community here at Notre Dame, but this is actually a concern shared more broadly. Again, across other higher ed institutions. To your very particular question of whether or not there's false information, that's something I would say that our code of conduct handles regularly outside of COVID times, right? So think of false reporting, God forbid, for a Title IX violation, right? That there are provisions already that the university has in place. And I think really importantly in the process we've designed, if that is a concern, of a student, that's something that would be really important for a student to raise as part of the process. And that's where I would say this is it is designed to be swift, but not robotic or automatic, but to provide more transparency there. But that's why that response by a student is an opportunity we thought was really important to have there.
Appreciate that, Maggie. We'll move to Dan Law.
Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Hoffman-Harding. I just had a quick point about section B.3 in the addition to the campus compact that states—
Ooh, I don't have it up, Dan, so okay, yep, go ahead.
I have the quote right here. Point 3 states, OCS has full discretion to assign outcomes it deems reasonable in response to violations of the compact and except as provided in section C below. There's no appeal from OCS decisions under the administrative process. This above section would bring it to question if the accused would have any ability to know if their punishment was given in an equitable fashion as it relates to other students, faculty, or any other employee of the university who committed the same or similar violations. The student body has no list of reasonable actions that relate to specific violations. This leaves the university open to actual and presumed ability to apply judgment rather than law or fact. If you're unable to enumerate specific punishments for specific violations of this policy, outside of previously stated failure to report to testing, don't you believe as student government, us as student senates, have the responsibility to ensure that there are proper forms of audit to this process to ensure these procedures and punishments are equitable and consistent? and do not vary case by case or student by student. To quote a constituent of mine from Dillon Hall regarding this concern and the concern of the only appeal through finding a defect in the process, and I quote, he said, "The only defect in the administrative process that I can foresee that would be enough to change the OCS's decision is that the university didn't realize your parents are big donors." So that's a concern a lot of my constituents have, to make sure that since we are not able to see punishment case by case in what they did, there's no specific alignment of like, if you break this rule, you get this punishment, to ensure that it's equal across the board, regardless of, let's say, your parents' donation or lack thereof donation to the university.
Dan, let me reflect a couple of comments regarding your concern. The first one is around philosophically, if A, then B, is something that we discussed and considered. You'll see, I think, as you alluded in your comment most closely, the testing. And the reason for that, Dan, was quite deliberate and intentional, because it felt the most black and white, where it didn't require the exercising of judgment. And so that we could provide that transparency to students. What really led the other way for us is to allow for individuality and circumstances. And it's actually at the core of the entire community standards process that was redesigned several years ago, which was to allow for individual circumstances for students. What I hear perhaps behind your question is a concern about consistency, which is something it may be helpful for you to know that the team in community standards actually does calibrate against very regularly. That requires, I think, for all of us in the campus community, a sense of trust, right? Of the professionals that we've hired who have been called to this work. And truly, something really important to me, and I know the other members of those teams, when we hire the folks who serve in that conduct officer role, is that they're in it for the right reason, which is to help students to learn and to grow. So I can't provide you with a grid. I can assure you that as this folks who are selected for these roles are doing it for the welfare of our community, and importantly for the welfare and the learning of the students there, and that there is calibration that occurs within the regular operations of the division, and certainly falls within my purview and my responsibility there. So that's very transparently the balance that we took. And the last thing perhaps I'll just say is that that is a group that also works really hard to treat a student as the student in front of them, understanding the student's circumstances, but in a manner that makes sense for the situation, not for who the student is, what background they might come from, or what relationship that they have to the university. That's something we hold, again, I think, as a deeply seated value. And I suppose a proof of this will be over the course of the process. And if that's something we can be helpful in building confidence in the people who've been hired to work on behalf of students, perhaps that's a way we can be helpful, but it certainly is a value that's really important to me as the leader of the division.
Thank you. So just a quick follow-up, would you, as like in your position and through the Office of Community Standards, I know you're saying that you hold these values to take a student in front of you and treat it equally. So would you be open to be transparent enough to allow, say, student government, or us specifically student senate, to see, say, a outline of these cases where here's the violation the student committed and this is the punishment they got, to have the power of audit to make sure they are being applied? If you're saying nothing's going wrong, there shouldn't be any issue with allowing the student body to see case by case. I'm not saying use specific names, but having specific examples of what they did and what punishment they got.
Yeah, so Dan, first of all, I think easy for me to say very open a conversation. I think this is where I'd like to invite in Brian Coughlin, who supervises the Office of Community Standards, and Heather Ryan, in terms of what information we could share. But I think there is a genuine openness without saying if A, then B, which is not the decision in the direction that we've gone, to try to provide helpful examples to students to give you more of a sense of what to expect.
Thanks so much, Aaron. I'll recognize Alec Brayler.
Hi, yeah, I had a question about the reporting process and the notification process. So one of the concerns the guys in O'Neill had was that the reporting process, obviously it's anonymous, anybody can file reports. And then the notification process, you have 24 hours to respond, or else the recommended outcome takes place. So I guess my question is two parts. How much weight do these reports have? Is someone presumed guilty if they're reported? Because that's kind of what it sounds like. You have 24 hours to respond, or else you have to you have the outcome that is recommended. So what do you do with a report once you get it? Is my question, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks, Alec. So let me first clarify the report. I think this is actually something that was perhaps lost over the course of the semester. The report is not anonymous. The report is confidential. A student has an opportunity to say that they would prefer not to be known to another student. And again, there's another balancing act, guys, right? We debated that, but it does protect Alec, and it was important to us to make sure that we weren't getting something from a false Gmail address or somebody outside of the community that we couldn't follow up with and identify if we needed to. And then to your point about is the report taken as authentic or as actionable in and of itself, that's where there's a human at the other end of this process, right? And the opportunity for a student to respond there. So student is not presumed guilty. As I said, testing, that's a little more black and white, right? Which is a different part of the process. Like either you were there or you weren't, or perhaps you forgot your ID that way. So perhaps there could be even some wiggle room there. But I think for these other reports, that's why it's really important that somebody reviewed it. And the recommended outcome comes with exercising that. Take a look at the report, see what the student has responded, and what we might then suggest as an outcome from that point. So it's not an automatic in any way, shape, or form presumption that everything in the report is true, but we do need students to respond and let us know if there's something that isn't accurate in there. And so it is really important to keep checking in to respond if you do to get that notice.
Okay, yeah. So just to clarify, you don't automatically get a notice once someone reports. Someone looks to refer the report.
You're
first.
exactly right.
Okay.
That's right. Yep. And in fact, Alec, I mean, it contemplated in the code is that it might be, let me give you a really tangible example. Like perhaps the outcome is a reminder. Let's say there's a picture sent in, right, of somebody for the one moment that you had taken your mask off to take a drink in one of, in Duncan Student Center, somebody snapped a picture of you and sent that in, right? What I anticipate is if we responded to that report, that it would probably look like a written reminder of, hey, please remember, right? This is something that keeps all of us safe. And there you are, done, right?
Thank you. Yeah, that was really helpful.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Alec. We'll move on to Lainey Teeters.
Thank you. So I think everyone agrees that COVID-19 is a huge problem and there do need to be precautions taken, but something else that came up last semester was the rising issues with student mental health as seen in the McWell survey in the middle of the year. So I was just wondering if you or the administration had any plans in order to circumvent this problem for the spring semester.
Yeah. Elaine, you're exactly right. And February doesn't help us in this respect. I think as we really designed the calendar for the spring, as a result of student input, we know how insufficient it was not to have an academic break. And I know we may not have fully solved that, but the provost really heard that feedback and tried to create additional mini break opportunities that we hope will provide some respite. It's worth all of you knowing actually that she sent an email to the faculty yesterday about those mini breaks and specifically went a step further and said, please don't offer an exam on the day after one of these mini breaks, because the idea really is to give students some opportunity to restore and renew. Again, it's steps we're trying to take there. In the letter I'm going to share, as I mentioned at the beginning with students too, we did hear feedback about additional tools and different things that we might make available to students that would be helpful, some of the meditation apps. And so I think we have some good news to share with you next week about that as well, to make those opportunities available for students. And we are very intentionally, the McDonald Center is one of many partners working to build on what we did partially successfully and learned we needed to do differently for Restoration Week last year. And then Fighting Irish Care, which I think was mentioned by Catherine, is another tool in place to give more services and professional support to students. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, it does have the opportunity for not only medical care, but also mental health care for students. So again, we're trying to make additional resources. And then the last thing I'll say on the mental health front, something I'm really excited about, is there are 6 pilot residence halls going through a whole new intensive training thanks to a grant that the university received from the Lilly Foundation that is designed around community well-being, restoration, and resilience there that we hope is going to have a really powerful impact on our campus. So those are just a couple of the things that we've got in the works. As I said, there'll be a little bit more news on that coming soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lainey. We can move to Michael Murakami.
Thank you. I wanted to go back. You mentioned photos as being one of the forms of evidence people could submit. I wanted to know what kind of amnesty exists for students for other violations. For example, if it's no secret that students drink on campus. So if someone were underage and drinking alcohol in the picture that was sent, do they get amnesty from the other violations in the picture as a result of COVID because these pictures shouldn't have been sent in a normal year? Or is that suddenly compounded and students are at risk of facing 3, 4, 5 charges as a result of one picture being sent in?
So let me give you a technical answer and what I hope is a more helpful answer. So I want to be honest to the code, Michael, right? And so if we received a report and a picture might be an important example of, let's use the worst case scenario of somebody being hazed or initiated via virtue of that. It is precisely contemplated in the code that then would be a scenario because of those other types of concerns from a university standpoint. It might go through the more comprehensive hearing process, which it's a more complex situation. And that would be a real reason that I think the Office of Community Standards would take a look differently at that report. So that's in the code and an option. What I want to say, and I want to say this in the right way, is I hope all of you are hearing a spirit from me of we're trying to keep this community healthy and safe, right? And so nobody is thinking about these reports in a way to catch students. We don't monitor you. I know there were rumors about this at the beginning, right? Nobody was sending vans around campus or video cameras in some way that was trying to catch community members not being safe, but we are trying to provide an avenue to share information. So again, this goes back to perhaps building mutual trust with one another if for some reason that is a concern about who are the people at the other end of this process, and they're out to keep a community safe and help students learn and grow. And so if there are concerns in a picture that we might be worried that you would have a challenge with alcohol, we might talk with you about that and address it. But we're not, the process and our objective is not designed to catch people, it's designed to keep the community safe. And I don't know if those a couple of examples are helpful to at least give a sentiment behind what we're thinking and why.
So more or less, if it's not dangerous, or if it seems like it's something that would happen without issue or without risk, even if it does break other rules, they wouldn't necessarily be at risk of a double charge.
Yeah, it's not amnesty, Michael, right? So I don't want to give you an impression of something that it's not, because you might be, let's say somebody was stumbling down drunk, I might be worried about you and what led you to make those choices that night, right? So I might still want to talk to you about what led to those decisions that evening and how it could be addressed differently. But it's not the objective to kind of pile on and check on a report, like here are all of the things that we can bring you in for. Does that make sense?
Right, yes.
I know it's not precise, but when I'm worried about you, and drinking, I think, guys, is an enormous challenge on Notre Dame's campus, right? And I don't mean this in the sense of healthy, like adult behavior. I think we have a lot of the work hard, play hard. I know we do, right? And really dangerous levels of drinking. And I think it's important to name that. It's important for me to say that I care about all of you enough, and I know our team does, to talk about those situations that would be worrisome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. We'll move on to Bianca Burnett.
Hi. So an issue that arose with some of my constituents was the weekly testing. And I know a lot of people were wondering what the flexibility for that would look like. For instance, if an issue arose that didn't allow a student to show up within their typical 9 to 7, I believe it is, time frame, or maybe if they simply forgot and showed an effort to try to reschedule or come to another day, would that be allowed, or is it pretty cut and dry?
Yeah, Bianca, it is pretty cut and dry, but let me explain why. It's actually a capacity question. So this goes back very early on when somebody asked me about net IDs. We talked about Zakai access, and the real constraint is we thought it was so important to do weekly testing. Again, that's some of the lessons we learned from other peers, that the folks who are at the COVID response unit have built up capacity in the time that you've been away. What the capacity doesn't allow us for is for people to come back on second days, right? So what we tried to do was provide you flexibility to choose your own day. And so that's one way we tried to give students agency. And then the other way is to give you that 9 to 7 window. So you've got all day and you're going to get a reminder, right? So there are ways, but we do need you to show up on that day simply from an operational concern that we can't flex the capacity any more than we've already done to try to get this frequency of testing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bianca. We've got 2 minutes left, and it looks like we've got 2 more questions, so that should fit perfectly. I'll first recognize Henry Jackson.
Hi, Ms. Hoffman-Harding. Thank you so much for being here. You're not in an enviable position, I know, and I'm very grateful to be coming back on Sunday. Living in the UK, it's kind of any freedom is bigger freedom. So obviously these rules are a little bit more Orwellian in nature, and a concern of mine is that people might be less willing to get in contact with the appropriate resources in the cases of emergencies. For example, as you mentioned, like alcohol-related issues or maybe even Title IX issues. Will there be some form of amnesty for students who report kind of emergency issues if they're breaking COVID rules, like when they want to report that emergency?
Amnesty for themselves, Henry?
Yeah, in essence, yes. I mean, as long as they're not doing anything illegal,
Yeah.
let's say, yeah.
So, I'm not as current. I'm so glad to hear that this is a concern from students, because I think maybe a promise back from me is to get more up to date on something we adopted thanks to student input several years ago. It's an expectation of responsibility that's in the regular part of DULOC. So where I was really well versed today, you guys, was on the compact piece there, but because of concerns that students raised about these topics, a few years ago, we put in place the expectation of responsibility, which was really to encourage students, we hope, or to give you assurance to do the right thing, which is to get help for a friend, right? Again, I know you guys are going to think I'm a broken record here. There's a person at the other end of the puzzle. And I want you to bring concerning behavior to us without worries. But I do, as my responsibility to you, if you were in a situation that was equally as worrisome to me around the example I give, we might want to talk with you about it. Does that make sense? So the piece of the puzzle that I need to remember, and I apologize that I don't have it handy, is how that interplay works. But that's the relevant piece if you want to take a look at it in DULOC when we're not talking today, or Sarah, as a follow-up. Maybe I could share the provision with you and make sure that there's some understanding generally of how the university thinks about that. But what I want you to hear from me is do the right thing. We might still want to talk to you about things that worried us about the situation that you were in.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Henry. And our last question will be a second from Thomas Davis.
Thanks for the opportunity to follow up, Sarah. I actually reserve my right to follow up on the question that you kind of proposed to me, Ms. Hoffman-Harding, and move to something I'm actually supposed to be asking questions about here, and that's judicial counsel. And it has to do with in terms of determining when a student is in good standing in terms of their discipline. And this is an important component of student representation at Notre Dame, because as members of the student union, everyone here, must be, according to our Constitution, of good disciplinary standing as determined by OCS to hold office in the student union. So we're entering election season very soon, and the Judicial Council has an important duty to manage student responsibility to represent their peers. So more specifically, my question is about what COVID probation entails, what the possibility of a student, not possible offenses, I guess that would be helpful, that would lead to what COVID probation, and if that COVID probationary period would have the same effects or the same negative consequences in terms of disciplinary standing and students' eligibility to represent their peers.
Thomas, I'm only going to halfway answer this. So this is going to be another one I'm going to have to come back to you on. What I can tell you is that COVID probation is not reportable under the university's conduct records reporting policy, right? So that is a new status. What I don't think we discussed, I'm thinking back to the folks on the committee, is how it would impact eligibility for office. And so let me get back to you with a more precise answer on that, because the only thing I know for certain this evening is that it's not reportable.
Thanks so much, Thomas, and thanks so much, Erin, for all of your time with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And, you know, as I promised the senators, if you or your constituents have any other questions, feel free to direct those to me or Rachel or Erin, and we'll be sure to direct those to Ms. Hoffman-Harding's office. And really appreciate your time, really appreciate this ability to dialogue, engage in conversation with you, understand the decision-making process. And again, just really appreciative of your time.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks to all of you for the short notice and for the really thoughtful questions. And please travel safely back to us. We really are looking forward to having you back. I know it'll be challenging, but we've missed you and the place will be alive with you back. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Erin. Have a wonderful night. See you. All right, folks, thank you so much. That was a really productive forum. I think my vision, Rachel and Erin and I, our vision as executives, creating this forum was just to give you guys kind of an understanding of the behind the scenes, the rationale, the decision making, but also the opportunity to advocate for your own concerns, your constituents' concerns, and also going forward, creating a really good channel of communication and also an ability to craft more effective legislation going forward. If you would like to, anything in here piqued your interest, you'd like to write a piece of legislation surrounding it for a future meeting, by all means, that would be the purpose and would be phenomenal. So thank you guys all so much for engaging, was really appreciative of the respect that you showed and the healthy debate and dialogue that you engaged in. So really wonderful work, guys. And we can now transition to our second order of business, which is our Judicial Council President nomination. And Thomas, would you like to read that letter or would you like me to?
Be quite pompous of myself to read it, but
no, it would not.
No, why don't you read it? No, go ahead.
All right. Written by you and also about you, so good things. I'll pull that on up. All right, everyone. So this was a memo written to me from Thomas Davis II on the 21st of January of this year. And the subject was a Judicial Council President emergency nomination. And in it, Thomas wrote, "Dear Sarah, as you are aware, Matthew Bisner resigned from the position of Judicial Council President on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. I speak on behalf of the entire Judicial Council in thanking Matthew for his service to our branch of the Student Union as an election committee member, Vice President of Elections, and most recently, President." And yes, Matthew, if you are listening out there, thank you so much. We really appreciate your service. As prescribed by the Section 7(1) of the Statute of the Judicial Council, in the event that the President is unable to fulfill the duties of their office by resignation, removal from office, sudden and severe incapacitation, or at any other extenuating circumstances, the office of the President shall be considered vacant. The President or representative thereof shall, if possible, communicate such vacancy to the advisor. Following the President's vacancy of office, the remaining Judicial Council officers shall be informed by the advisor and shall, by majority vote, nominate a successor to the Student Senate. The Student Union parliamentarian shall present the written nomination to the chairperson of the Student Senate for consideration within 2 academic weeks of the vacancy, pursuant to Article 14, Section 3B2 of the Constitution. At 12 p.m. today, this was again January 21st, the Judicial Council officers met to nominate a successor to the Notre Dame Student Senate for its consideration and approval. And this is Thomas speaking. I am honored to report that the Judicial Council officers have nominated me, Thomas Davis II, to assume the role of Judicial Council President for the remainder of 2020-2021 term, expiring on March 31, 2021. Given the alterations to the 2021 election cycle, due to the global pandemic, the Judicial Council officers respectfully request that you call the Student Senate to order from winter session recess to consider this nomination prior to the petitioning period for the 2021 student body election, which begins February 3rd, 2021. As we enter a period of time when the Judicial Council is incredibly active and the President has many constitutional duties to fulfill, it is of paramount importance that the Judicial Council proceed with a Senate-approved president to best ensure the student union operates ethically and with the Constitution of the undergraduate student body of the University of Notre Dame, DULAC. And this was respectfully submitted by Thomas Davis II on behalf of the Judicial Council officers, and he is currently our student union parliamentarian, as you're all aware. Okay, so without further ado, we can now open the floor for any questions for Thomas. Would love to keep them pertaining to his role as Judicial Council President, but if you have extraneous questions, I guess those could be welcomed as well. Just use that hand raising feature. I will check that. Questions for Thomas?
Motion to end questioning, move to debate, a vote. I don't know what's next.
Debate.
Second.
All right, let's vote on that. Remember those green check marks. Vote, people. Okay, cool. Questioning has ended. We'll move to debate. And I do believe, Thomas, I will have to kick you out, but you are still my parliamentarian. Oh, he entered the waiting room himself. I wanted to kick him out. That's okay. Anyway, any points of debate on the nomination of Thomas Davis to J Council President?
Motion to end debate and move to a vote.
Second.
All right, we can do that. Vote, people. Okay, fabulous. Before we move to a vote, since there were no encomiums to Thomas given in that debate time, I would just like to personally say, if Thomas is on the live stream watching, he should not be, but I do believe that he has the proper temperament and experience, requisite experience to take on this role. Been an absolute pleasure working with Thomas this past almost year now. I really think that his professionalism is unparalleled, and I think that he has all the requisite capacities to be a really excellent Judicial Council President during this time. So I would say vote for Thomas. I try to be impartial, but on this one, I think I will show a bit of partiality. I think he'll be excellent. So without further ado, we can now vote on the nomination of Thomas Davis. All right, vote, people. Okay, fabulous. He passes with flying colors. That is unanimous. I can now bring him back. All right, Thomas, you are J Council President, and it was unanimous, so congrats.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm quite honored, very excited.
Sweet, beautiful. Yes, claps, emojis. Awesome. So I will hand it back over to you, Thomas, if you would like to read the tentative Student Union parliamentarian nomination.
Yes, of course. So I have resigned in my capacity of Student Union parliamentarian, obviously. Here's my nomination for Student Union parliamentarian. Members of the Senate, it is with great pleasure that I present to you my nominee, Madison Nemeth, for the position of Student Union parliamentarian for the remainder of the 2020-21 term. According to Article 12, Section 3C of the Constitution of the Undergraduate Student Body, the parliamentarian shall monitor the transition, internal review, and overall process of the Student Union as outlined in this Constitution and make appropriate recommendations to the Senate. The parliamentarian is tasked with guiding senators and other members of the Student Union through uncertainty with respect to the Constitution and parliamentary procedure. Any procedural questions or discrepancies will be addressed to the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian also serves on the Judicial Council as chair of the Committee on the Constitution and as a non-voting advisor to the Election Committee. I'm fully confident in Madison's ability to serve as parliamentarian. She has demonstrated great passion for the role of Deputy Student Union Parliamentarian and the mission of the Student Union already, assisting me as an active project leader on the Committee on the Constitution. As a current senator, she will be entering the role with a semester's time of observing parliamentary procedure and the Committee on the Constitution's current priorities. There is no one else I feel can provide more stability and knowledge of Senate procedure and the Constitution at this time than Madison. She's been a thoughtful deputy, holding me accountable and supporting my work when necessary. Due to her attentive nature, enthusiasm for serving the constitutional mandate of the Student Union, I fully endorse Madison for this position submitted by myself.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Great letter. We can now open the floor for any questions folks may have for Madison. So raise those hands.
Motion to end questioning, move to debate.
Second.
All right, we can vote on that. Okay, great. Questioning has ended. We can now move to debate. Madison, I will kick you out or to put you in the waiting room. Okay. So now we can enter into debate on the nomination of Madison Nemeth to Student Union Parliamentarian. Anyone have any points of debate?
Motion to end debate and move to a vote.
Second.
All right, let's do that. Fabulous. Another unanimous one. Really excited to work with Madison. All right, congrats, Madison. Another unanimous vote. I am very excited to have a new seatmate now in Jordan. So really looking forward to working with you and know you'll be an excellent parliamentarian. Sweet, yes, claps for Madison. Good stuff, folks. Okay, that was short and sweet, I must say. We can move to any announcements that anyone feels they need to share, or we can close until I see you all, which will be a week from today. But Thomas Davis has raised his hand. Recognize Thomas.
Thank you. I have some very important announcements for all the senators regarding elections coming up. Tentatively, the information session for student body president and vice presidential election will be on the first day of class at 7 p.m. Tentatively, we're looking at Hesburgh Carey Auditorium. So this will be before, I guess, our now scheduled meeting in Jordan. Hopefully that time will still work for everyone if you do have any inclination to going to that meeting. At this time, we're requesting that anyone interested in going to that meeting, because you're running for a ticket, so 2, plus your campaign manager if you'd like one. So we request that you limit your team essentially to 3 people so that we can have it in person in the hopefully Hesburgh Carey Auditorium. There will be an email going out to the whole student body about that, but I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. Now, an important, very important reminder I'll use this time is also on the first day of class, the petitioning period will begin. You may recall from past years, this is when potential candidates petitioning to run to be candidates would be going around with paper asking for your signature. Obviously, with COVID, this will not be a possibility, and it isn't a possibility at all for you as senators in the first place, because you are not allowed to endorse anyone, and that process also includes petitioning for this purpose. So as I've said, in your capacity as senators, stay as far away from these elections as possible, not only to help yourself and if you have any ambition in running, but also just to keep these elections as clean as possible. A lot of unintentional things can happen. We understand that, but just staying away as far as possible from anything that could be construed as an endorsement would be super, super helpful. So thank you.
Thanks so much for those 2 announcements, Thomas. And Madison, I also see that you have an announcement.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick. So thank you guys for confirming me, but on that point, I will be resigning as senator, so we will have another position open that I need a senator to fill on the Committee on the Constitution. So please be thinking about if you would want to do that. Thomas, I'm not sure if meeting times are changing or not, but I think they'd have to now that the Senate, is meeting at that time.
You're the chair, so it's up to you now.
Okay, yeah, but so yeah, just be thinking about that. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Madison. And I will also say, I'll put this in an email, just like I said, I'll put the Jordan and the sweatshirt thing in an email. If you guys have any legislation that is currently bubbling within you that you would like to bring to the first meeting, which will be Feb 3, Wednesday, Feb 3, first day of class, we're going to stick with the Sunday submission deadline, if at all possible for you to get that to me, Karen, and now Madison as our parliamentarian by Sunday at midnight. That would be wonderful. And we can review that for our first meeting when I get to see all of your lovely faces in person. So really looking forward to that. And I see Michael Murakami has his hand and I think I know it's coming.
Great to see everyone. Motion to adjourn.
Let's hear a second.
Second.
Okay, let's vote. Okay, fabulous. See you guys soon. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah.